Ever notice how your mix sounds huge in headphones and then completely falls apart everywhere else? I'm Dean, also known as D. Ramirez, and this video is for Raven Studios. Today I'm showing you the stereo widening mistakes that cause that and why wider isn't necessarily better. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into it, I just want to play you the groove that I've been working on. It's a very simple, consists of drums, bass line, a little piano stab and a vocal. Yeah, I've kept it purposely simple just so I can demonstrate these techniques. And it goes a little something like this. First without the vocal. With a vocal. There you go, typically me, housey, bumpy, skippy groove. And yeah, so let's get into the first mistake. The first mistake is overuse of the Haas effect. Okay, so what is the Haas effect? I remember being shown the Haas effect years ago now, 20 years ago, and it literally blew my mind. I was like, what? You can take any sound and make it super stereo. Amazing. And I admit, I did overuse it, literally put it on everything. Little did I realize some of the problems that it can cause. So what is the Haas effect? It is basically you take a sound and you split it into two channels and you delay one of the channels by a number of milliseconds, anywhere between 5 milliseconds up to 20 milliseconds. And what it does, it's a timing effect. It's a timing trick that tricks the ear or one of the ears into thinking that sound is coming from that place slightly differently to that sound. Okay, so you've got the same sound but timed slightly differently, makes it sound rather than in the middle, comes from the sides like that. So let me demonstrate it. Okay, so what we've got here is the piano stab. I'm going to use this piano stab as the perfect demonstration, and we're going to use what you call the align delay, because this align delay here allows you can see you've got a left and a right, and it allows you to delay the milliseconds in between. So let's start with no delay. That's mono. As I start to delay, look at that. Gets super wide. I find that 10 milliseconds is generally the sort of sweet spot. The wider you go, or the more milliseconds you add, it starts to get into delay territory. You don't want that. So 20 milliseconds I find is like the maximum. Okay. 10 milliseconds. What does it sound like in the track? Certainly sounds impressive, but there's a problem. And let me demonstrate what the problem is. And then you can think about, well, we can think about what other options we have to create the same effect. So let me just demonstrate by using this free plugin here, the MSED by Voxengo. What it allows you to do is it allows you to split the side information from the middle information. It's a mid-side processor. It lets you listen to the middle and to the sides. So if I listen now, if I put this like down here at like 2 milliseconds, listen to it without this on, you'll hear that there's no side information, actually no stereo information. However, if I put this on, it'll give you stereo information. Look at that. But listen how weird it sounds. It's got this sort of phasey quality about it. It's got a weird phasey quality. If I mute the sides and have the mid on, like that. Let's play that again. Weird phasey quality. Not only that, if we then collapse this into mono, so this is what it sounds like in stereo. Wide and impressive. I collapse that down to mono. Sounds weird, doesn't it? It sounds like it's really phasing. It's gone quieter. It's got smeared. The transients are not sort of it's lost its punch. So there's all sorts of issues there. Now, why would it matter it being collapsed down to mono? You say, well, of course, it's a valid question because most systems these days are stereo. You might be listening in headphones, they're stereo. Your stereo in your kitchen, a stereo in your car. It's all stereo. It's in stereo. So why would you even care about this? Well, the problem is we've got our phones now. If we listen to our phone like that, okay, it's in mono. If you listen to it like that, it generally plays in stereo. That way versus that way. So a lot of the times you are listening to music in mono. And also you might have got a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen or something that's mono, okay? And most importantly, club sound systems generally are mono. You think about a club sound system, you don't stand in front of a stage like that with the speakers at either side all the time necessarily. You might be in a room where you've got, an odd shaped room. It's like an L shape or something like that. So if you have speakers either side of that room, if they were in stereo, you're going to lose some of the information. So to counteract that, they generally make the sound systems mono. So you're going to have a problem because you collapse it down to mono. You're going to lose some of your sounds. It's going to sound smeary and lose its punch. Okay? So that's the issue with the Haas effect in general. Now, there are some other options to use, and one of the ones I've found here is this plugin called Wider. Okay, in mono, add the Wider plugin. We're getting that same impressive width. However, when we do collapse it to mono, nowhere near the artifacts that you get when you're using the Haas effect. So now this is a great plugin. It's by Polyverse. It's a free one. Just go to their website, enter your email address. Yes, more data capture. They've got you, and they will send it to you free. You become part of their ecosystem. They'll sell all your information just like everybody else does. Okay. So that's an option there, an alternative. There are other alternatives, but for the sake of this video, we'll keep it short. So the second problem that we find is basically keeping everything wide. People over-widen everything. Now, there's an analogy to this. I've just thought of this earlier. Hopefully it'll make sense. I thought about it. If you're walking down a road, right, and you've got runners, you've got lots of people running either side of the road like that. But the middle of the road is clear. You're just going to walk down the middle of the road. Eventually, you'll stop noticing the people on the sides, right? Because you've got a clear path and you can just walk to your heart's content. People running down the side like that, you'll stop noticing them. However, if you've got people running at you like a wall, like that, in the middle and at the sides, you're going to be dodging those people, aren't you? So you're going to be dodging the people in the middle, and then you'll be taking notice of the people at the side, and you'll be taking notice of the people in the middle. Okay, so my point is that you are sort of creating a contrast. You're creating friction. You're sort of noticing that there are people at the side of you now because you're having to dodge the people in the middle. Okay, so it's like it's the same analogy to over-widening things. If you over-widen something and everything sits in the sides like that, in that stereo information, eventually you're just going to stop noticing it. And it happens very quickly. If everything's in the sides there, nothing sounds wide. So what you need to create, you need to have people running at you from the middle there to create the contrast. The contrast between the middle and the sides is what creates the width. You can only determine how wide something is by how narrow something else is. So by over-widening, you can make things sound mono. Okay, let me give you an example of that. So let's make everything on this instance wide here. So let's make the piano wide. Let's make the bass wide. I'm going to do this with some chorus. And let's bring the vocal in and make that wide as well. That's already wide, actually. Now, for me, it's really obvious, but because everything's living in the sides now, it's all getting congested in that side area. And you're not even noticing it. It just becomes normal. It doesn't sound wide at all. It just sounds like it sounds, because there's no contrast. So what I do with this one is I decide that I want the vocal to live in the sides, but I want the piano to be in the middle. So I'm going to sacrifice the width of the piano there by bringing this wider plugin off. I'm going to sacrifice the width of the bass because I want to go with the vase analogy as well. So I say vase, I'm not American. It's vase. The vase looks like this, right? So bass is down there. These are bass frequencies. And as you work up the frequency range all the way up to the high stuff, which would be hi-hats and shakers, you can start to pan things out wider, okay? Now, that's sort of the way that I look at it. It's the vase analogy. So because it's bass, I tend to want to keep it in the middle down there. That sort of comes at you from the middle. So the bass is kept mono. Okay, the drums, we'll come to that in a minute. The drums have got some width going on, but generally the kick drum and everything low in the drums is there. And so I want to keep the piano stab. Now can you hear that by having that piano stab in the middle there, okay, doesn't sound quite as impressive on its own. But in the context of the mix, it actually makes the vocal sound really wide. Listen to that. I'll widen the piano again and you'll hear what I mean. Not only is it clashing with the frequencies in the side of the piano, it's also making everything sound less wide, okay? So you need contrast. Okay, so that's that. Now, the next one is also using width to fix depth or arrangement problems, okay? So sometimes, rather than making things wide, and again, I'm going to use an example for this. Sometimes rather than making things wide, what we want to do is make things deep. We want to give them 3D space, okay? We want to create that rather than, the sort of 180 space from side to side. We want to create the depth from behind, okay? And now people don't necessarily know how to do that because it's not something that we think about too much. We mostly think about the panorama, which is left to right, because we've got two speakers, right? But there is the 3D space that we can work in. And how we create this 3D space is by using reverb, in particular like early reflections, very small reverbs that you can barely hear, which create this depth, the sort of feeling of being in a room. And what's a room? A room is a 3D space. The feeling of putting something into a room can make it sound like it's coming from behind or in the front. Either way, it's a 3D space as opposed to a side-to-side space. What do I mean by that? Well, I've got this set up here, this return effect here. It's called the depth verb, and I'm using the R verb here, the trusty R verb. And what I'm using is a very, very short reverb time. In fact, I've turned the reverb off. I'm just using the early reflections, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If I turn down this is the A verb here. Listen to the drums on their own. And I'll bring the depth verb in. I'll over-exaggerate it first so you can hear it. Pull it back. Now that has been put on all of the sound. So if I unmute that, if I take that out of solo and listen to the whole track. Okay, now listen without it. It goes flat. It's gone flat. Flat as in no depth. Now this is giving it depth. It's pushing it back and it giving it sort of surrounds it by this room hug almost. Again. Hopefully you can hear that. The YouTube sound sometimes sort of masks these things unless you really over-exaggerate it. So hopefully you can hear it. Now, what people often do is they don't know about this sometimes. So what they'll do is they'll try and widen the drums, for instance. They'll use a wider plugin like that, So yeah, you've widened it in the stereo, but what you've actually done there is, again, you've congested the sides, you've got in the way of the vocal, you've made everything sound wide as opposed to deep, right? So that's another mistake that people often make, making everything too wide, concentrating on the sides there without thinking about the depth. Again, if you want to know more about this, go to the Raven Studios and there's a full in-depth 2-hour course about stereo widening techniques and the pitfalls and the advantages of doing so. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about is committing width instead of adding it in parallel. Now, what do I mean by that? This applies to quite a few different things here. So, look, if I take this piano, for instance, right, and I'm going to take the wider off, so it's mono. Now, a great way to widen something and to give it some space and some movement is to use the chorus effect, okay? Now, what a lot of people do is they put the effect on the channel itself, okay? So look, and I'll do that. I'm going to put it on the channel. I'm going to do it in the context of the mix and bring it in. Can you hear what's happened there? What's happened is it's gone all mushy. It's lost its punch. It's lost its sort of volume. It's just got this nice width, but it's gone a bit like sloppy, so to speak. Okay, so and what's happened is because we're using a chorus on the channel itself and we're using the wet-dry mix. What the wet-dry mix does, it basically goes from no effect all the way up to full effect. But in the middle there, you've got a mixture of full effect. You've got a mixture of effect and dry. But you're effectively turning down the dry signal as you go along, like that. So from 0 to 100, the dry signal gets turned down. So in the middle, the dry signal's turned down, and you're adding this, it's a mixture. The best thing to do is to use it in parallel. Now, I've got one set up over here on E, which is chorus. Look, I've got the same one. It's 100% wet. And listen, when I bring it in, you don't lose the dry signal. The dry signal remains in the middle, punchy. You're then adding in parallel the chorus. There's the signal. You're adding that. I've also got one called a micro shift here. This is the Sound Toys one. If I open this one up, sorry. There we go, micro shift. Let's do that as well. Let's add this to it. So that's a common mistake, and this doesn't just apply to choruses or widening. It applies to reverbs, anything where you're doing a wet-dry mix, because what you're doing is effectively turning down the dry signal. You're far better with something like Ableton doing it like this, where you create a chain. So you go Command G, which will group it, okay? Like that, open up the chain, like that. Underneath you go Create Chain. This will be called Dry. This is the dry chain. This is the chorus chain. The chorus chain needs to be 100% wet, and then you can turn that on. And then what we can do with this is you can then mix it in. This is the mix, the parallel mix there. So that's dry. So look, you're not messing with the dry signal. You're just bringing in the mix, the effect in parallel with the dry signal, okay? And that applies to a lot of different effects. Okay, I hope that helped. There's a few mistakes that people make, and along with a few techniques of how to do these things, but just you got to think about widening intentionally. As I mentioned, if you want to know a lot more and get the full breakdown of this with a lot more techniques, we talk about mid-side processing, all sorts of things. It's a 2-hour-long course. Please head to theravenstudios.com and watch the full course. All right, see you in the next one.